Halloween Gnomes by Colton Dennis. When 5 gnomes are taken from the highway, the family finds out that the gnomes are alive. Will anyone survive this massacre machine running? Conveyor belts are moving. Gnomes are being placed in crates. Lid shuts. Trucks driving. A car drives, then stops. I hope you enjoy the new house. I love it, said Lucy. I know I'll love it. Both George and Lucy smile at each other. George looks into the rearview mirror. Ashanti looks up, then puts earbuds into her ears. Music playing. She's a real joy, said George, laughing. Give her a break. Her father just left me, said Lucy. All right. The light turns green. The car starts to drive. Trucks drive past. Car stops. George rolls down the window. Jackass, said George. The trailer door shakes, then opens. A crate falls out of the trailer. Look, that crate fell. Let's go get it. The car drives down a road, then stops. Doors open. George moves pieces of the crate. Gnomes appear. They didn't break. Let's take them, said Lucy. I think we should take them back, said George. That truck almost killed us. It owes us, said Lucy. All right, but I think it's a bad idea, said George, grabbing gnomes. Door opens. Ashanti, hold these, said Lucy. What are they? Asked Ashanti. More yard decorations, said Lucy. Ashanti is holding gnomes. Doors open, then shut. The car makes a U-turn then drives away. Ashanti is humming a song. The car slows down, then pulls into the driveway. Doors open. Lucy, it's beautiful. Ain't it beautiful? Ashanti asked George. Actually, I love it. It's great, Mom. Good choice, said Ashanti. Truck slows down. Doors open. The trailer door opens. Both George and Lucy walk towards the truck. Thanks for helping Jim, said Lucy. No problem. That's what brothers do. Jim sees the guest house. Is that where I'll stay? Asked Jim. Yeah, all to yourself, said Lucy. Thanks for letting me stay. I can't live in that huge house all by myself, said Jim. Hey, it's what sisters do. Dinner is at 6, said Lucy, walking into the house. Ashanti puts the gnomes down, looks outside, and then sees both Nick and Scott swimming. Gnome's eyes glow, look at Ashanti, then see George approaching. George walks inside. Gnomes go still. Hey Ashanti. Ashanti gets startled. I didn't mean to do that, said George. I think I'll go choose my room. Whatever view is great, said Ashanti, walking upstairs. George leans onto the counter, looks out the window, sees both Nick and Scott, then smiles. Lucy approaches. What's funny? Asked Lucy. Nothing. Where do you want these? Asked George. Put them in the front yard, said Lucy. George grabs the gnomes, walks outside, then places the gnomes on the ground. Footsteps approaching. George gets startled. Sorry, sir, I'm your new neighbor. I'm Eddie, and I live next to you. I just wanted to come say that, said Eddie. Sorry, I'm George. I live here with my wife, stepdaughter, and brother-in-law, said George. Well, you moved into a great neighborhood, said Eddie. It was great meeting you. Have a good day, said George. Ashanti continues staring out the window. Knock on the door. Lucy appears. Ashanti shuts the shade. "What are you doing?" asked Lucy. "Nothing," said Ashanti. "All right, here's your supper," said Lucy, walking away. The light turns off. Jim smoking. Footsteps approaching Jim. Jim gets startled. "I'm sorry." "Hi, I'm Eddie." "Your new neighbor," said Eddie. "Jim," said Jim, shaking Eddie's hand. "You're going to love living here." Eddie sees gnomes, then walks towards them. "I had never seen these gnomes before." "Where'd you get them?" asked Eddie. "I don't know. My sister and brother-in-law found them," said Jim. "They could be worth something," said Eddie. "Well, I could see if she wants to sell them. But I don't guarantee anything," said Jim. "Well, you have a good night." Eddie is walking toward the house. Door opens. "Moira, I found something that'll make us rich." "Gnomes." "Halloween gnomes," said Eddie. "Let's get them," said Moira. Footsteps walking downstairs. "Where are you going?" asked Simon. "Go upstairs. Me and your aunt need to do something." Simon walks upstairs. "Let's go," said Eddie. Door opens. Both Eddie and Moira are slowly walking towards the bush. Jim throws a cigarette, then walks towards the guest house. The guest house door opens and then shuts. Both Eddie and Moira walk toward the house. "Where's the gnomes?" asked Moira. "Right here," said Eddie, pointing. Moira looks, then sees nothing. "I don't see any gnomes," said Moira. Eddie looks. Gnomes are gone. Music playing. Door opens. Mike scoffs. "I hate night deliveries." Doorbell dings. Door opens. Pizza. 11.50 Have a good night. Door shuts. Mike walks toward the car. "Dumbass." The door opens and then shuts. Next stop. Keys fall. "Damn it," said Mike, is reaching for keys, grabs them, sits up, and then sees the pumpkin gnome. Candle lights. The pumpkin gnome blows fire. Mike catches on fire, then burns. Door opens. Mike falls to the ground. The pumpkin gnome walks out of the car. Other gnomes appear. Gnomes are walking away. The light turns on. Both Eddie and Moira run back toward their house. George looks around, then shuts the door. Door opens. Both Eddie and Moira are breathing heavily. "I thought you said, they have gnomes." "I didn't see any gnomes," said Moira. "They must have moved them," said Eddie. "Where?" asked Moira. Eddie thinking. Guest house appears. Door opens. Jim is walking toward the car. The car starts, then drives away. The light turns red. Car stops. Jim looks, the light turns green. The car turns right, slows down, then stops. Door opens. Jim runs toward the car. Music playing. Jim sees Mike's burnt body, gasps, and then runs towards the car. The car starts, drives away, and then pulls into the driveway. Door opens. "George, Lucy, get down here," said Jim. Footsteps walking downstairs. Jim pacing. "What's going on?" asked Lucy. "Someone's dead over on Main Street," said Jim. "What happened?" asked Lucy. "I don't know, but he was burned or something," said Jim. "I'll call the police," said George. Claw cuts wire. George grabs the phone. No dial tone. George looks at the phone. "Is something wrong?" asked Lucy. "There's no dial tone." The lights go out. I'll check the breakers. George grabs the flashlight, then turns it on. I'll be back, said Jim. George. Door opens. George is walking, stops, sees the breaker box, and then opens it. Light shines on the breaker box. Shadow moves behind George. Leaves crumbling. George looks, then gets punched. Eddie appears. Sorry, but I need to do this, said Eddie, dragging George away. Gnomes watch, then follow Eddie. Door opens. George, George, said Lucy, walking outside, then back into the kitchen. He's not back, asked Jim. No. I'm going to go find a shanty. Footsteps walking upstairs. Jim looks out the window. Door opens. A shanty, get up, we've got a little problem, said Lucy. Blankets get pulled off the bed. A shanty's gone. A shanty groans. Hello, honey, I need to know where your parents got those gnomes, said Moira. Those Halloween gnomes were on the side of the road, said a shanty. Door opens. Eddie drags George, then ties him up. Is she saying anything? Asked Eddie. All she said was, they found the gnomes on the side of the road, said Moira. Simon walks downstairs, then sees the front door open. Hello, anyone here? Asked Simon. Wicked laughter. Simon looks. Both the Frankenstein gnome and the witch gnome appear. Simon walks backwards. The werewolf gnome jumps onto Simon's back and then bites his neck. Simon screams. Both Eddie and Moira hears a scream, run upstairs, and then see gnomes. The gnomes, Simon, said Eddie. Gnomes run towards both Eddie and Moira. Both Eddie and Moira shut the door. Door locks. Moira gasps. Scott and Nick. They're upstairs, said Moira. Jim continues looking out the window. Footsteps approaching. A shanty isn't upstairs. Jim, what are you looking at? Jim, said Lucy, looking at Jim. Shhhhh, I think something's outside the window, said Jim. I don't see anything, said Lucy. Window smashes. The Dracula gnome bites Lucy's neck. Lucy screams. Jim grabs the Dracula gnome, then sees the garbage disposal button. Lucy, the button. Press the button, said Jim. Lucy pushes the button. Garbage disposal is turned on. Jim struggling. Lucy grabs the Dracula gnome. Both Jim and Lucy push the Dracula gnome's head into the garbage disposal. The Dracula gnome grunts, then breaks. You all right? Asked Lucy. I'm great. The pumpkin gnome appears behind both Jim and Lucy. Candle lights. Look out, said Jim. Both Jim and Lucy move. Fire blows out. The pumpkin gnome looks at both Jim and Lucy. Both Jim and Lucy run out of the house, then stop. Is everything all right? Asked Scott. No, a gnome is chasing us, said Lucy. Really? Look out. Both Jim and Lucy look. Scott swings a piece of wood. Both Jim and Lucy get hit. You can't get in our way. Nick, help me, said Scott. Both Jim and Lucy are being dragged away. I think they're still out there, said Moira. Footsteps approach the door. Knocking on the door. Moira, it's me. Door opens. Help with this. Both Eddie and Moira drag Jim and Lucy downstairs. Did they talk? Asked Scott. No, not really, said Moira. Where did you get those gnomes? Asked Scott. I said, in the middle of the road, said a shanty. The door creaks open. Nick looks upstairs. "I'll be back," said Nick, walking upstairs. Door opens. Nick walking. The lamp hits Nick. Nick falls. Gnomes appear, then walk towards the door. "Tie them up," said Scott. Both Jim and Lucy are being tied up. Scott pulls out the gun. Ashanti is looking at the staircase. Gnomes are walking downstairs. "I'm going to go check on Nick," said Moira, walking upstairs. Door opens. Moira looks around. The werewolf gnome appears, jumps at Moira, and then bites her leg. Moira falls. Both Eddie and Scott run upstairs. Door shuts. Both Eddie and Scott bang on the door. Moira looks. The werewolf gnome growls. The Frankenstein gnome grabs Moira's head. Both the pumpkin gnome and the witch gnome grab Moira's arms. "Help! Help!" continued Moira. The werewolf gnome bites Moira's neck. Moira gasps. "Moira!" Scott kicks the door open. Gnomes look. Eddie fires a gun. The witch gnome breaks. Scott grabs Eddie's arm. "We need them alive. You go that way. We'll find them," said Scott. Both Eddie and Scott are walking. Ashanti feels a knife, grabs it, and starts cutting rope. Rope falls to the floor. "Mom, George, Uncle Jim," said Ashanti. All three groan. A knife cuts rope. "Where are we?" asked George. "In the neighbor's cellar." "Mom, the gnomes are alive," said Ashanti. "Yeah, Uncle Jim destroyed one," said Lucy. The werewolf gnome growls. All four gasp. The werewolf gnome gets closer, then jumps at all four of them. Gun fires. Werewolf gnome breaks. Nick groans. "Follow me quickly," said Nick. All five run upstairs. Gun appears. "Where do you think you're going?" asked Scott. "Let them go, Scott." "You don't need them," said Nick. "Would you like to join them downstairs, now?" said Scott. "Scott," said Nick. Gun cocks. All five are walking downstairs. Scott locks the door. Eddie walking. Frankenstein gnome appears, then runs past. Gun fires. "Come out," said Eddie. The Frankenstein gnome peeks out. Gun clicks. The Frankenstein gnome grabs the rail and then breaks it. Eddie steps backwards. Pumpkin gnome trips Eddie. The Frankenstein gnome steps onto Eddie's chest. Eddie sees the Frankenstein gnome. Rail goes through Eddie's mouth. "Eddie, Eddie." Scott walks, then sees Eddie's body. The pumpkin gnome appears on the banister. Candle lights. "No," said Scott, falling downstairs and then groans. "What do we do?" asked Lucy. Nick looks at the window. "Here, everyone can fit," said Nick. Window opens. "It's not opening all the way," said Ashanti. Nick shuts the window, then smashes it. "Hurry," said Nick. All four are crawling through the window. Scott stands up. The Frankenstein gnome is staring at Scott. "Don't hurt me." The pumpkin gnome appears behind Scott. Scott looks at the pumpkin gnome, then looks at the front door. The pumpkin gnome blows fire. Scott grabs a silver tray. Fire hits the silver tray, then stops. Scott throws a silver tray. The silver tray hits pumpkin gnome. Scott runs. "I'm out of here," said Scott, running towards the car. Car drives away. Nick looks at the knob on the gas tank. "Come on, you're next," said George. "Get your family out of here." "I need to stay," said Nick. "No, get out here," said George. Ashanti sees the Frankenstein gnome. "Behind you," said Ashanti. Nick looks. Frankenstein gnome swing rail. Rail hits Nick. Nick falls. Frankenstein gnome sees all four outside, then starts walking towards them. Nick stands up, turns the knob, then cocks the gun. Gas hissing. "Hey, over here." Frankenstein gnome looks. "Go to hell," said Nick. Frankenstein gnome throws a rail. Rail goes into Nick's stomach. Nick fires the gun. House explodes. All four fall. Away from the house. All four are running. Houses collapses. "Is everyone all right?" asked George. All three nod. "Hey, what happened to the other guy?" asked Lucy. "Car driving. I'm free. No one will catch me now," said Scott, laughing. The pumpkin gnome appears in the rearview mirror. Candle lights. Scott sniffs, looks into the rearview mirror, sees the pumpkin gnome, and then screams. The pumpkin gnome blows fire. The end. Return of the Halloween Gnomes by Colton Dennis. When the survivors are held hostage, they find out that the gnomes have returned. Will any of them survive? Footsteps walking. Door opens. 6 people appear. "You two, that way. You two, that way. Me and you, go straight. We need to find it. Before it wakes the others, watch your step too," said Leo. Footsteps walking. Oleg turns off the radio. "I don't think this thing is." Kari shushes Oleg. "No. I'll talk if I want to." "What'll happen?" asked Oleg. Boxes fall. Kari pushes Oleg down. The pumpkin gnome appears. Kari raises a gun. Pumpkin gnome runs. "That could happen." "You're lucky I got your back," said Kari, helping Oleg stand up. Footsteps walking. "Carlito and Orlando, did you find anything?" asked Leo. "Nothing yet, sir," said Orlando. "Well, keep searching," said Leo. "Yes, sir," said Orlando. Radio clicks. Oleg, Kari. "Do you read me? Damn it, I hate bringing that bastard." "You go find them." "I'll continue on," said Leo. Stacy walks back. Leo continues walking. Pumpkin gnome sees all 6 of them, then looks at the crate. Crate reads, "Halloween Gnomes." The pumpkin gnome looks down, sees Stacy walking, then pushes the crate off the shelf. Stacy sees both Kari and Oleg. "Hey," said Stacy, being crushed by the crate. "Stacy," said Kari. Oleg looks up. "The gnome, tell Leo." "I got it," said Oleg, climbing shelves. Pumpkin gnome runs. Kari grabs the radio, then turns it on. "Leo, Stacy's down." "Oleg is in pursuit of the gnome," said Kari. "I'm on my way." Radio clicks. "Orlando and Carlito, Stacy's down. Meet me at the front. And bring a stretcher," said Leo. "Where'd you go?" asked Oleg, looking right. The pumpkin gnome looks at Oleg. Candle lights. Fire blows out. Oleg rolls off, then grabs the shelf. Footsteps running. "Stacy, she's gone," said Leo. Kari looks up. "Sir, Oleg," said Kari. Both Kari and Leo see Oleg hanging off shelves. "Oleg, hang on," said Leo. Kari looks through the scope, then sees the pumpkin gnome. Oleg slipping. The pumpkin gnome gets closer. Candle lights again. Gun fires. The pumpkin gnome gets shot, then runs. Hang on, Oleg, said Kari. Oleg puts his foot on the lower shelf, then starts climbing down. Are you all right? Asked Leo. Yeah, nice shooting, Tex, said Oleg. Stretcher appears. Ambulance drives away. What's next, boss? Asked Orlando. We need to find their weakness. Let's do a background check on these gnomes, said Leo. Footsteps walking away. Crate appears. Blood flowing. The pumpkin gnome sees Halloween gnomes. Eyes glowing. Halloween gnomes are looking around. The pumpkin gnome approaches. 3 months later, typing on the keyboard. Footsteps approaching. Hey honey, said Lucy. Hey mom, where's George? Asked Ashanti. He and your uncle are building the shed. What are you working on? Asked Lucy. My essay, it's for Mr. Dennis' class, said Ashanti. All right, supper is at 6, said Lucy. Nails are being hammered. There, it's finally done, said George. Footsteps walking. Door opens. Did we find them yet? Asked Leo. Not yet, sir. But we'll keep trying, said Orlando. We need to find them quickly. Who knows what they're up to? Said Leo. Beeping sound. Typing on the keyboard. I found them, sir, said Carlito. They're moving pretty fast, said Leo. Van driving. Sheet moves. Driver 1 looks into the rearview mirror. Van stops. Door opens. Driver 1 walks toward the back of the van. Back doors open. Sheet moving. Driver 1 is looking around. Growling behind Driver 1. Driver 1 looks. The werewolf gnome jumps at Driver 1, then bites his neck. Gnomes jump out of the van, then see both George and Jim. Guns cocking. What if we run into Oleg and Kari? Asked Orlando. If they shoot at you, shoot back, said Leo. All 3 walk car driving. Door opens. George, Jim, supper's done, said Lucy. All right, said George. Both George and Jim walk inside. Gnomes look, see the cellar door open, then walk inside. Footsteps walking. Beeping sound. They must be in that house. Let's go, before the others come, said Oleg. All 4 are eating. Knocking on the door. I'll get it, said Jim. Door opens. Guns are being pointed at Jim. May we come in? Asked Oleg. Both Kari and Oleg are walking into the house. George walks in. Who the hell are you? Asked George. I only have one question. Do you have this? Asked Oleg, holding a picture. George sees a picture of the pumpkin gnome. I don't have it, said George. My little friend here says otherwise. Keep an eye on them, said Oleg. Get into the room. Sit down, said Kari. Beeping sound. Oleg opens the door, then walks downstairs. The car stops at the house. Door opens. Machine beeping. They're here, said Orlando. You 2 stay here. Let me talk to the people, said Leo. Kari looks outside. Oleg, Leo's here, said Kari. Oleg runs upstairs. Let's go, the back way, said Oleg. Move it, said Kari. The back door opens. All 6 are slowly walking. Leo knocks on the door. Orlando sees Kari. Leo, said Orlando. Guns firing. Kari fires a gun. Carlito gets shot, then falls. Guns continue firing. All 6 continue running. Footsteps approach Carlito. Stay with him, said Leo, running. Kari sees the van. There, said Kari. All 6 see driver 1's body. Get in, said Oleg. All 6 get into the van. Van drives away. Leo stops, raises the gun, then lowers it. Carlito coughing. Leo runs back. Carlito, stay with me. Look at me, said Leo. Carlito shuts his eyes. He's gone, said Orlando. Machine beeping, the gnomes, said Leo. The beeping gets louder. Both Leo and Orlando look at each other, then to their right. Gnomes appear. The pumpkin gnome picks up the machine and then starts grunting. We want to help, said the pumpkin gnome over the machine. Leo smiles. Thank you, said Leo. But we don't know where they're going, said Orlando. I think I know, said Leo. Van driving. George sees Oleg's knife. So, who are you? People asked George. Don't worry about that, said Oleg. Then, where are you taking us? Asked George. You'll see, take this left, Kari, said Oleg. Van turns left. Oleg whispers to Kari. George stands up, then punches Oleg. Van stops. Kari grabs his gun, then points it at George. Oleg groans. You all right? Asked Kari. Not yet. Oleg punches George. Now I feel better, said Oleg. Van continues driving, then turns into a parking lot. We're here, said Kari. Doors open. Move it, said Oleg. All 6 are walking. Door opens. The car slows down. They're here, ready, Orlando? Asked Leo. Yeah, said Orlando. Gnomes peek out the window. Window smashes. Both Leo and Orlando look. Gnomes are gone. Let's go, said Leo. Car doors open. Both Leo and Orlando are running towards the building. What are we waiting for? Oleg asked Kari. The gnomes, they want these for. Once they come for them, we'll trap the gnomes, said Oleg. Door opens. Both Leo and Orlando are walking. You go that way. Just be careful, Orlando, said Leo. Orlando nods. Both Leo and Orlando are walking in different directions. Keep an eye out, said Oleg. Is something wrong? Asked Kari. We have visitors, said Oleg. Footsteps walking. Shadow moves. Orlando looks around, then continues walking. Kari looks at the top shelf, then sees both the Frankenstein gnome and the witch gnome. Oleg, said Kari, pointing. Oleg looks, then sees gnomes. They're here, said Oleg. Leo looks around the corner, then sees all 4 of them. PSST. PSST. Leo sees a pebble, then tosses it. The pebble hits Ashanti's hand. Ashanti looks, then sees Leo. Stay put, whispered Leo. Both Kari and Oleg continue looking at the gnomes. Leo looks through the scope. Orlando walking. The werewolf gnome growls. Orlando looks. The werewolf gnome looks at Orlando. Nice. I'm on your SIA, screamed Orlando, getting his throat bitten. Gun fires. All 6 look. Kari sees Leo, then fires a gun. Leo gets shot in the shoulder, then runs. I saw Leo, said Kari. Go kill him, said Oleg. With pleasure. Kari cocks a gun. Oleg looks up. Gnomes are gone. Footsteps walking. Oh, Leo, where are you? Come out, wherever you are, said Kari. Shadow moves behind Kari. Kari turns around, then fires the gun. Leo appears behind Kari. Drop the gun, Kari, said Leo. You'll have to kill me first, but we both know you won't, said Kari, turning around. I said, drop the gun, said Leo. Gun cocks. Drop it, Leo. Leo puts his hands up. Get the gun, Kari. It was stupid of you to come, said Oleg. Where are the gnomes? Leo asked Kari. I don't know, said Leo. Kari smiles, then punches Leo. Where are they? Asked Kari. All four hear footsteps approaching. They're coming back, said George. Gnomes appear, then walk towards all four of them. Wire snaps. Gnomes look up. Cage traps gnomes. Footsteps walking. Yes, we trapped them, said Oleg. Leo sees the pumpkin gnome, then smiles. What are you smiling about? Asked Kari. Count how many gnomes you have, said Leo. Oleg looks into the cage. There's 4, said Oleg. There's 5 gnomes, said Leo. The pumpkin gnome cuts rope. Both Kari and Oleg look around. George tackles Oleg. Kari points a gun. Leo punches Kari and kicks the gun out of his hand. What should we do? Asked Lucy. Run, said both George and Leo. All three are running. Leo sees the gun and then reaches for it. Kari punches Leo. Leo kicks Kari, reaches for the gun, then points it at Kari. Kari holding device. Don't think about it. One push, goodbye, said Kari. Good idea, Kari, said Oleg. The pumpkin gnome appears behind both Kari and Oleg. Candle lights. The pumpkin gnome blows fire. Kari catches fire, then falls. Leo catches the device. Oleg points a gun at the pumpkin gnome. George punches Oleg. Oleg drops the gun, then raises his fists. Leo pulls out handcuffs, grabs Oleg's hand, handcuffs him to the shelf, then hands him the device. Get out of here, said Leo. What about you? Asked George. I need to find my friend. And Thomas too, said Leo. George looks at the gnomes, starts walking, stops, and then grabs the gnomes. Footsteps running. Leo sees Orlando's body, runs towards him, then gasps. Oleg sees a saw, grabs it, and then cuts off his hand. Leo stands up, then sees Oleg. Oleg is holding a device. Goodbye, said Oleg. Gnomes jump at Oleg. Oleg drops the device. The device slides toward Leo's feet. Goodbye, Oleg, said Leo, pressing the button. Building explodes. All 4 fall. Are you guys all right? Asked George. Man, we need a vacation, said Ashanti. All 4 laugh, then walk away. The end.